Hello everybody! Welcome once again to another lecture from The Moral Animal by Robert Wright. The course is Psychology at Edmund Burke School. I am David Panush, and this lecture is about Chapter 9, which is about conscience. So what is the conscience? Your conscience is that little voice in the back of your head telling you what's right and what's wrong, telling you do this, don't do that, telling you you should feel bad about doing X, or you should feel good about doing Y. It's a feeling of obligation, a feeling of loyalty, feeling of guilt. It's the voice inside your head that tells you right from wrong, that tells you what you should be doing at any given point. It is a universal human trait, again, barring some abnormality. All human beings have the trait of a conscience in their head, telling them what they should be doing or making them feel bad when they don't. How the volume on that voice is going to be set is going to be individual, of course, depending on both genetics and environment. Conscience plays a huge role in the evolution of kin selection and reciprocal altruism, because recall that in both of those behaviors, one is doing something for others, and so conscience is the voice that kind of tells you you should be doing something for others, or even for yourself, something like you should be doing your homework, but you might feel bad about it because you know you might be disappointing your parents if you get bad grades. So what keeps us tied to somebody that does us a favor in reciprocal altruism to some degree is our conscience telling us, hey, you need to pay this person back. They were nice to you before, and then you'd feel bad if you're not nice to them again. The research shows us that 1/3 of conscience, in terms of how high that voice is set, is going to be genetically determined from your parents and what you've received from them. But 2/3, which of course is huge, is going to be determined by your environment. And so it pays to understand how the environment shapes the conscience. So how is the environment going to shape your conscience? Well, it's going to come from the culture, and primarily, especially in youth, it's going to come from your parents. Maybe you have siblings, maybe you have friends, and your siblings and your parents and your friends are essentially saying, hey, this is the right way to do things. This is the wrong way to do things. You think of taboos, so your parents will say, don't do that, that's a taboo. Obviously, laws come from government, but you might have traditions in your house or rituals in your religion. So if you think again about all those areas of culture we talked about at the beginning of the course, all of those are giving messages that are saying you should do or feel X, Y, and Z in these types of situations. It's flexible. Every culture is different. So in one culture, something is going to be a taboo, and in another culture it's not. So in one culture you might be required to dress a certain way and feel really bad if you don't dress that way, and in another culture people don't emphasize that same mode of dress, and so it's not a part of the way the conscience is shaped in that culture. This tells us something about our evolutionary past, because folks must have moved around a bit and come into different families and different groups a little bit, because they were able to adapt to other rules and other taboos when they moved from group to group. If they were rigid and it was only set to be feeling a certain way and act a certain way, probably they wouldn't have done well in different social environments or different cultural environments over time. So think about reciprocal altruism and recall, when are you going to do something kind for somebody? It's a cost-benefit analysis at its root, and the cost and benefits are dependent on culture. In some cultures, some things might be very costly. If you're in the desert, water is going to be very valuable. And so how you weigh how you should act around water in terms of sharing it or not sharing it or stealing it or taking it for yourself is going to depend on the culture. Think of the Western United States. There's nothing worse than a horse thief back in the in the Old West times, because horses were so crucial to that culture. That was seen as a greater crime than other crimes. So your conscience about how you might behave around horses out west was shaped by the culture. Generally speaking, you're either praised for what you do or you're blamed for doing it wrong. There are a set of rewards and punishments. This is how behavior is shaped and determines how we're going to end up setting our conscience internally. In childhood is when conscience is generally shaped. Most children, if we go back to the parent-offspring conflict, remember, children want as much as they can get because their R value to themselves is 1, whereas parents don't want to give them as much because the parents have genetic investment in their future offspring or in their siblings, and so you have this parent-offspring conflict. So the child is constantly pushing boundaries, and it's where is it pushed back, that's where the conscience is going to be set to some degree. Why do children push the boundaries? Well, of course, from a strictly genetic standpoint, it's because they need to get resources. But what's the emotion behind it? To some degree, studies have shown it just feels good to break the rules, and it feels even better to break the rules and get away with it. So part of why we think that children will do these things, try and lie or exaggerate or manipulate, is because it actually feels good just to do it itself. So evolution has equipped us with the emotional motivation to try and see where the boundaries are. Parents and our culture show us the boundaries when we get caught. They show us the boundaries when they notice our lies, and they either impose upon us consequences that we then learn, maybe in these circumstances I can't get away with X. I can't steal the cookie because my parents are around. They punish me and ground me for stealing the cookie from the cookie jar. But I learn that when they're out of the house, and if I only steal one cookie so they don't notice that all of the cookies are gone, I got away with it. So that is a process of what the book calls learning how to profitably cheat. A child is going to very carefully calibrate. They're pushing the boundaries. They're seeing where they get caught and how they can get away with things and when they can get away with things. I'm sure you're quite familiar with this in terms of your interactions with your parents. How much can you push them? And it's going to be different for different kids and different families and in different cultures, of course. But the mechanism is going to be the same. It's going to be the child trying to get more than the parents or the society wants them to have. And of course, some children are going to be more motivated to do that than others. Maybe some are going to accept their portion more readily, and others are going to chafe against it. But ultimately, you learn where you get caught. You learn what the consequences are and whether or not you're willing to take the risks, and that's how you learn to profitably cheat. The chapter shifts into this discussion of character versus personality in small communities and large communities. And it flows from conscience because to some degree how a society shapes the individual consciences of its members creates that society itself. And the book discusses as the Victorian era, because that's when Darwin lived, and it talks about character. What is this idea of character? Character is the idea of stable traits over time in an individual. It's your inner core. It doesn't necessarily change that much once it's set. Now, it might be very fluid when you're a child, but even many studies have shown that character is something they can measure certain kinds of characteristics in 4-year-olds, and they tend to be very stable over the life of that individual. So it's set pretty young in terms of your character. How honest are you? How much integrity do you have? How do you view right and wrong and morality and these sorts of things? What are your inner values? Personality, on the other hand, is fluid. You may adopt a different personality over the course of time in your life, depending on the time and the place that you're in, depending on the people that you're talking to, depending on whether or not, how are you with your parents, how are you with your friends, how are you with your teammates, how are you with the theater and the play, and maybe you go to summer camp and you put on a whole different set of personality traits. So it's more surface. It's more dependent on the customs of the time and the place that you're in, and it's more about your charm and your pizzazz. So how does this play in? Well, in a small, stable community, the value is going to be on character because people will know it. People will know your character. You see these people over and over again. Eventually, character matters. It's who you really are, and it's going to come out. So we encourage, we find in small stable communities that cooperation and altruism is encouraged. Character and conscience are valued because you can't escape a small stable community. Everybody knows each other. Nobody's going to forget. If somebody has an interaction with you and you break the rules, they remember, and they don't not know who you are. Oh, you're so-and-so's kid. I know you. I remember. So there's memory, and because it's a small community, there's gossip and there's talk, and everybody knows. You cheat one person, the whole community is going to know, and it's going to really hurt your reputation. The other thing in a small, stable community is you're going to interact, we talked about the word iterative, over and over with the same folks. So because of this, the benefits of cooperation are high. I get to interact with you over and over again, hopefully in a cooperative way, but the cost of cheating are higher. If I do mess up, then I get a reputation, and it's hard to escape because I'm in this small, stable community. This is what the evolutionary environment was like, so this is how we generally evolved. And our modern society is quite different, and we'll get to that in just a second, but I want you to pause for a second and think of Burke, and is Burke a small community? Is Burke a stable community? What are the benefits of cooperation? What happens to somebody's reputation when they cheat the system in one way or another? And how does that affect the community and our ability to cooperate, or our ability to perhaps break the rules? And where at Burke do you think we really are better at this, and we encourage the altruism, and where do we not? So that's worthy of consideration. Think of large mobile communities, big cities. It's basically the opposite. I can interact with a stranger one time, and nobody's going to know about it. Nobody's going to remember it, and so I don't have the benefit of cooperating over time. Remember the prisoner's dilemma. If I play it once, I'm encouraged to defect. That's the benefit for me. So I might as well defect. I might as well cheat. And I don't get much out of cooperating because I'm not going to get paid back in the future. So in this kind of community, we see less of a cooperation. We see more of a value on personality. Because I need to convince you in a very short period of time that I'm awesome and you should cooperate with me. And then I might either take advantage of you, or I might get the benefit of cooperating with you. But then I don't need to interact with you again. So it's not about my character, it's about my personality. You can pause for a second and think about online and how we can manipulate our reputation online so much easier in some ways than we could in the future. You can lie, and you can filter only the things you want people to see. On the other hand, the online world has quite a memory, so I think it goes both ways to some degree. This large mobile community having a more competitive environment is proven when they rerun the tit-for-tat computer simulation and let strategies drift in and out of the simulation. Remember, they ran it before, everybody had to keep interacting. So that's like that stable community. But they run it and they let the strategies leave and come in, and then they find that more competitive, less forgiving strategies that take advantage and cheat and defect more can win, and tit for tat can lose. Some final thoughts. Genes program the behavioral development, the genes that program conscience. Remember, it's only 1/3. They tell us how should our conscience be set, but they don't program the behavior itself. It doesn't say don't murder or don't be mean. It says maybe be mean in particular situations, and you're going to learn through your environment how to get away with things and when not to. Also, in groups and out groups, generally speaking, we are going to be much more predisposed. Remember, people we're related to or people that have done us favors in the past, and basically that is our friends, we tend to be more, the conscience comes into play in our interactions with them more. Those who we don't deem as part of our group, we're going to tend to be less generous to, and that's that large mobile community thing. So there you go there. And also this last idea that morals can hold us together more tightly than laws. We feel obligation and loyalty through our morals, and that can hold us together more tightly than something that's imposed from outside. As usual, please do the reading, answer the questions, and see me if you have questions.